Hi all, and welcome to part one of the year-end review. So, another year is about to end, and a new one is about to begin, one stacked with endless possibilities and the 2020 vision. Now, next year will be a lot easier than this in many ways, not in others, as many hurdles were overcome in this calendar year, as old systems, entities and dark-based groups were either eliminated or exposed badly this year. The dark forces and their clown minions will continue to roll out their tired old circus act. It's what they do, as they cling onto conspiracy theories that they still have full control of everything and everyone. That is the illusion they must overcome, as their energy harvesting system known as banking was cast broken asunder, and a new way an operator has breathed new life, transparency and a more fair-based system. Now, thankfully, there was a sharp reduction in false flag events this year, as no longer are they getting away with staged events and passing it off as real to anywhere near the levels they could do previously. And as we go through these reviews, it will also be a chance to see how many of our warnings, hints and forecasts came to fruition over the year, and how far our show is ahead of the game. The People's Club has grown this year as more people got on board, after a burst of increased interest came in about midsummer, and has seen a surge in donations into the People's Club. I'm hoping to develop the People's Club website soon. I promise to do that in August, September, but time flies and we're kind of busy. But the reason I want to do that is to introduce what we at the People's Club are all about. Our visions, goals, and a new way of operating is a must if we are to progress forward. Like I said in a recent show, the cooperative model doesn't just apply to business, it is a social, life and psychological damage reversal process. Now, some of the new things we introduced this year was the THI state country groups with varying degrees of success, and I would rather focus on the positive aspect of them, but some aspects of it are and were a bit disappointing. It is a joy to see people meeting up and making friends who would never have met under normal circumstances. And several groups now have met up and had a great time together, making new friends, sharing their stories and their life with each other. And this is what THI is all about. All are speaking of the feeling like they found a new family or community, which is wonderful to hear, given so many of us have been discarded, neglected, or plain ignored by our own blood-based families, which is a source of great pain and suffering to many of you who listen to this show. Now, regardless of when the funds come out, those groups have given people hope, given them a voice, given them a reason to push forward onto the better path in life. It has encouraged caring and sharing, and a shared responsibility to push each other on. It has also taught some very harsh life lessons, and how difficult this action of being personally responsible is. It drags up old wounds, failings, failures, and unaddressed shadows and inner work. It shows how much and how deep each and every one of us have absorbed the old system mind control based structure, and how easy it is to lapse back into those old ways, despite knowing they never worked to begin with. It all showed some who were willing to look at how much work they've done on themselves and how far they have to go. Now, that is not a negative thing, as some may think. It's an opportunity to correct your own behaviours, as suddenly in a group That it's not just a personal mirror looking back at you telling you what you want to hear, but several mirrors, which then allows the self an opportunity to make minor corrections, either to their behaviour or demeanour in a support-based group. Now, some, as we know, have reacted badly, too immersed in covering up their own weaknesses, shortfalls, or in some cases agendas. And it's not something we as admins like to deal with in particular, but we have to take the necessary actions to protect the group members and also the integrity of the group. We also saw the release this year of the THI ebook, 330 plus pages stacked with information from the shows and also powerful input and opinion from several of our members. And if you're new to the group and haven't seen it yet, check out the files section on THI or MeWe under the title Heart of the Matter. It's compelling stuff. THI. Well, where do we start? Well, we have to start somewhere, given it's a year-end review. But quite frankly, it's been an extraordinary year on so many levels. The increase in subscription, memberships and listeners have gone up rapidly this year, and YouTube in particular has over doubled its subscribers this year alone. Now, the shows have certainly increased in volume and intensity in what has been a rapid spurt of learning and growth for all listeners this year, and it's a credit to you all that the majority of people have not only absorbed it but processed it, and so many embraced it. Our must listen to section went through the roof this year, and with 8 From Russia with Love shows, The Clowns in Panic and Crossroads for Humanity have added much needed relearning of what is far nearer the truth than what we have been presented with before. There was one line that just kept repeating throughout many of our shows and exposés this year, and it increased exponentially. Born in New York, born to Jewish parents. And following a recent request, and indeed several throughout the From Russia with Love shows, for the Jewish people to fight back against these fake Jews, a post on Thursday arrived with that being the case, and it's great to see and hear. A much deeper knowledge base that revealed many of the hidden connections, the deep interconnectedness of it all, and the depths the dark forces will go to not only subvert and harvest our lives, but the depths at which they will go to stay in control. That control, no matter who argues against it, has plummeted this year as more and more of their system has been expired or rendered obsolete, and not just in the banking sector either. Enormous strides have been made in terms of getting so-called top people to understand what this show and Kim has been telling them all along. You were all duped and you've all been played. Major work has been completed with the quantum system this year, with much frying of their game-playing systems, a massive elimination of their backdoors into the banks, and several other government-based institutions. New programs and software were introduced that renders clowns blind into places that they don't have the need to know. That works both ways now. A new system name was also introduced recently due to the clowns trying to take credit for the system, trust and assets, and so Kim renamed the system so everyone is aware who is who, and it's called KIMS, K-I-M-S. But it also means Key Integrated Monetary System. This system also integrated many other systems that were a grave national security issue for America, as homegrown traitors in several agency-based organizations have done their utmost to bring this country down at the behest of their dark forces overlords. My Patreon took off this year and people seem to enjoy the transcripts on there as a reminder of past shows. And it also shows I don't hide behind what I say on the shows. It's all in there. So I want to say thank you to all who have contributed to my Patreon. It is much appreciated. And whilst I was hoping it wouldn't have to go on this long and the trust funds were made available, it still means a lot to me for your support. We'll start off with January after this music break. Hi, all right, we're going to get straight into it and we're going to time travel back to January. Can you remember that? Seems like last week sometimes. This year's just literally vanished. But that was one of the forecasts last year in our show. That time would speed up and make less sense. So here we are. So on New Year's Day this year, clowns again threatened Mr. Trump and he had to retreat into a safe location. And we warned that this was becoming a more common occurrence than people realised. And that happened quite a lot this year. And I wish to make clear the following statement at the time, at which point do the authorities in this country stand up not only for the people but the president and this country that they all avow to love and protect. At this time, we also had the shutdown, the government shutdown, and it rolled on because of a $5 billion bill for the wall, according to the Portal people. But is it not indicative of a far larger issue for those who are capable of thinking for themselves? Why would you shut down the whole government if you are a Democrat over a $5 billion bill? When these are the same people who have just handed over $700 billion to the military with no questions asked. Here, have $700 billion of the public's money to blow lesser countries into oblivion, and yet no one asked the question, why have they never attacked Russia or China? Because according to the Portal people, there are the big baddies. And yeah, we attacked Iraq for oil, Afghanistan for drugs, and neither country had planes to fight back. And this is also why they've never attacked Iran, or North Korea for that matter. Then we had, we'd done a series of shows explaining in detail, which will come up shortly, about the RV. And some people had written in and complained over some aspects of the show and my dismissive attitude and described as arrogant attitude regarding the RV. I wonder what those people think now. Carrots for jackasses. You know? But then we had the IMF pushing 134 countries into scrapping their currencies, which again, does that not mean in and of itself that the RV, which is a currency revaluation, will not take place if they're telling countries to go and replace their currencies with crypto? There you go, talking common sense again. This was their latest attempt back in January following the failed TRNs, Treasury Reserve Notes, and USNs by the Federal Reserve is for the world to go crypto. Well, I guess that never worked out too well either. Pelosi was caught sneaking in a clause into the reformed spending bill for TRNs. This was to reopen the government. She'd slipped a bill in for Treasury Reserve Notes, and that is why the government at the time remained closed. Pelosi and a gang of non-American interests attempting to hijack the country further. Also in January, I read out a new bill that was created by the trust team called the HR 25. to promote freedom, fairness and economic opportunity by repealing the income tax and other taxes, abolishing the Inland Revenue Service and enacting a national sales tax to be administered primarily by the states. And you were all told that this is what the team had been working on since August or September the year before, and finally now it has a platform. Will it pass the voting system? As we said at the time will tell. And then we got the shocking evidence that came in that was full and corroborated evidence that Nancy Pelosi and others were planning a 9/11 type attack on the Capitol building during the State of the Union, which she initiated in a bizarre letter that particular week to take place on January the 29th, with the intention to eliminate the president and the vice president for her to then become president by the end of that month. Now, in a subplot, the blame would then be shifted onto ISIS with the intention to then wipe out the Middle East. And I mean literally wipe out the Middle East. I'm not talking like let's drop some bombs. I'm talking about leveling the whole thing. That's what they were talking about. And also force the troop withdrawal from Syria to stop. And this was straight out of the Dick Cheney handbook. Trump arranged another meeting again that particular week to resolve the government shutdown and also issues over the wall, and Pelosi and the Democrats failed to turn up. Why? Because Pelosi, Schumer, and 109 lobbyists held a top meeting in Puerto Rico over the weekend of how to get rid of Trump and fully take over the country, ignoring the fact that this was operating outside of government capacity. But why are the Democrats holding meetings in Puerto Rico about American interests without the approval of the president? Where are the portal people on that story? So I gave the opinion that Pelosi is running for president, not 2020, but now. This is their game. Pelosi and Hillary stitched up Mike Pence big time and his ego ran with it. Get Trump out, in goes Pence, except they've played Pence and have the dirt on him, so he wouldn't be selected either, leaving the facelift woman, the Speaker of the House, next in line, or so they think. And this is why the impeachment narrative is being pushed. They can't get 2/3 of the votes to carry that out either way, so that is mute. But they carried it on later in the year anyway. Why? Distraction, 100%. MS-13 gangs were sent to the region to attack Kim and the team again early in January, and Kim and some of the team had to flee. The MS-13, along with FARC guerrillas, are what is pouring through the southern border to attack the American people at the request of the clowns. That was the second attempt that month. This type of attack on Kim and the team was repeated again, this time on request of John Von Wright, the new Pindar. Rumour has it he will not last long in that role, and another replacement is lined up. Guess our show was right again. John Von Wright was turfed out later in the year. A warning once again, you will not. That went out in January where I made the statement, and it's up to you to decide whether that statement was correct or not. You will not make any sense out of national or public speeches, tweets, or the mainstream media portal people. Trying to make sense of that will not serve you well going forward. This is a war, and in wartime, we don't give our enemies opportunities to ruin plans or strategies, unless you're stupid or working for them. Speculations are not exactly helpful either. Stick to the facts known And to our regular listeners, you are told more of what is real than any other show. Embrace it. Don't jeopardize it by asking me leading questions on plans or strategies. This is not a game. This is war. I think you'll all agree that statement became more indicative as the year progressed. Mnuchin and Trump, early January, almost came to blows about him trying to serve two masters. Mnuchin, who had already been fired twice in the previous 2 months for several indiscretions in his position, like blocking the funding for the disaster relief areas of Florida, Georgia, Alabama, North and South Carolina, and also California. That was a $105 billion project from the Manor World Holding Trust to restore all those areas impacted by the so-called storms. Mnuchin and Hillary, along with armed mercenaries from the group known as Citadel in New York, who incidentally also control the whole of the NYPD, stopped that relief taking place. Now, Mnuchin, who apparently has been picked as the latest chosen one, there are several, is working directly for the Rothschilds and the fake Chinese elders, along with the deep states of America and China. Neither deep states are the actual governments. Remember that when rhetoric between the two countries, it applies to the dragon groups and deep state, not the respective governments. In January, it was said this show warned about a certain general many months back and how he would be removed. And despite words to the contrary on a certain blog, which did take place, the same general is now exhibiting the behaviour we knew privately many months ago and warned Mr. Trump accordingly. General Mattis, remember that? Generals gathered in the Mattis, is now ordering thugs to remove the president, as he is being misled into thinking that Mr. Trump is blocking the dinar cash in extravaganza. Oh dear. They blamed everyone. They blamed Kim, they blamed Trump, you name it. Obama got the blame. He didn't deliver it. It's not happening. Carrots for jackasses. So I guess our show got it right again. Mattis was fired later in the year. So with all the increased chatter about the RV, we decided to do a piece, What is the RV? And gave a full explanation for those who were new. Well, the RV is a collection of currencies collected around the world, most of them stolen loot out of invaded countries or printed out by the Rothschilds' own printing company called De La Rue. That would essentially be revalued at X times the current valuation, and other currencies would be devalued at X times the current rate. For example, if the RV had validity and went ahead, the talk was that the dollar would devalue between 50 and 80%. Zims, dongs and dinars, which were held in vast quantities by the cabal after they looted those countries, would increase by 3 to 10 times their current value. Most top military, mercenary groups and so-called terrorist groups, politicians and media giants were paid in dinars, not dollars, on the promise each note would pay out 3 to 10 times its current value, and so making them all multi-millionaires overnight. And this is what is stopping the authorities moving, as they all want their payouts. Except nobody appears to have gotten through their single brain cell thinking and told them A, it's not happening, B, you've been duped, and C, the current banking system can't handle the influx of that kind and would totally collapse all banks globally within 5 minutes of it being banked. To pull off the RV requires a down payment that is larger than all the money ever spent by everyone in the last 500 years or more. And assets to back it would require a number of Earths, not just one, to support it. Now ask yourselves, is that scenario eminently possible? And this is the stark reality of what people are promoting on the internet. Carrots for jackasses. That rolled on throughout the year, as we all know, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. So with the country on a shutdown, people were asking, why do we need a wall with Mexico? And this report kind of shocked people when I read it out. But there's far more going on down there than most people realise. THI members are now aware of it. Now, the wall is to prevent the free movement of tens of thousands and possibly hundreds of thousands of humans from South America, whose regions are riddled with poverty, drug-laden and war zones, being transported into private holdings, which is a polite term for concentration camps, ran by the Bush Cartel, who operate and control the Texas Rangers groups. So what is the purpose and reasons for the wall? Well, the purpose is to prevent mercenaries, acronym-led groups created by our own agencies, drug gangs intent on and that live for violence, which are later used to do the dirty work of others in a plea bargain. The sex trade and trafficking, child porn industry, human slavery selling, or the worst aspects of this, people are being used for snuff movies, dissecting them live or otherwise for organ harvesting, which are then sold on to the hospitals for between $90,000 to $225,000, depending on which organ. Extracting children's adrenal glands for the Kool-Aid juice, the elite strength that helps with life longevity. And you think that lot is bad enough. The worst thing, depending on your perspective, is some humans were sold for food. Wall will go down deep enough to encounter any tunnels underneath, and the wall is expected to cost roughly $35 billion in total. So what has been coming in are caravans of death, and the latest one Trump alluded to contained 1,000 people to be used in various forms. Hezbollah and other mercenary Arabs funneled into Venezuela and onto these caravans, all arranged for by Obama and his Muslim Brotherhood group, lesser known as Langley 3. Now, whilst that was shocking at the time, evidence came forth later in the year to validate that particular piece. Cobra with a C, or is it with a K? On his blog mentioned the term Annabelle in January, and is indicative of the Cobra since November 2016. Annabelle is one of the Cabal financial systems they have been trying to implement to replace the quantum system held by the trust. The fact that Cobra thinks it's something positive is indicative of where he is at now. The Annabelle system is Cabal. And I went on to report at the time, it was all very disappointing to me, but I warned back in December of 16 there was a change in Cobra once he linked up with the fake Red Dragon and the Blue Chicken cult. The writing was on the wall. Now, for those who don't know, I have spoken personally to Cobra 3 times and know who he is or who he was. Maybe an indicator. Well, that was a preemptive warning back in January. Revelations in the From Russia with Love 8 series confirmed so much more, did it not? By going back to try to change the past and subsequently try to alter the future, this was our biggest mistake. We have to observe from the past from a place of neutral, not active or reactive, assess it, develop hindsight and bring it into the now, and correct it from here and now to create the different future, not the past. Short statement, which would lead into other pieces. We reported that Trump is receiving and sometimes acting on some very bad intel from the deep state, Black Dragon groups, of which Pelosi is head of, and he needs to be more savvy with what he's taken on board. General Mattis, who is now fired, we reported is now working in the system for the clowns at Central Command in Florida against President Trump. He was always. Zimbabwe, we reported, is under a state of emergency in January, that people are being killed and tortured in that country. And what for, you may all ask? The effing RV. Zimbabwe had refused point blank that they will ever revalue their ZIMS currency. In fact, we reported they are going to change their currency to another currency altogether, leaving the ZIMS valueless. Oops. That was proven correct later on in the year, as you know, or some of you will remember anyway. But people globally are dying, being tortured, suffering, all courtesy of the Rothschilds, Chinese elders, militaries, agencies, and a plethora of paid agents or just plain stupid people in the alt media pushing the RV. That's what's happening, that trade platform exists. A lot of people died because of it. Then we had an invasion of Panama, Colombia and Venezuela, along with a stop-off to Haiti, none of which was approved by Congress or the Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Trump. Neither were consulted either, which tells all Americans this country is not being ran by the government in any way, shape or form, but foreign-based bankers, mercenaries and dragon groups, along with the treasonous mainstream media. Not only in this country, but most other countries also. All who are blaming Trump. Now you know the truth. Are you still going to blame Trump? Or are you going to get off your backsides and protect this country? Then we reported about Brexit in the light of Brexit in the UK, which in my opinion was Baron Rothschild's exit, BR exit, which was transferring all power and wealth to the East and forcing the West into bankruptcy. You know, I warned then, in fact I warned when I was still in Cosmic Voice, since when have the establishment rarely allowed the public any real say in politics? Like, never. So the fact they allowed this vote to go ahead means it was done with a hidden intention, does it not? Of course, things haven't gone too well for Baron Rothschild or any other Rothschilds for that matter, and the transfer to the East, courtesy of the Trust, which is why he tried to get back in control of the UK just over 12 months ago, hence the delay or a potential new vote, which will overturn the first vote. They'll make sure of that. Well, that rolled on throughout the year, and I guess it was proven correct again. I was on OYM then, because that didn't change the Circle of White Light until a bit later in the year. And I addressed certain things that had gone on in Ireland. There was reports of more shootings, paramilitary shootings and fun and games again. And I wrote this piece. You think the IRA bombing campaign started in the UK in the 1970s? Think again. Their history always repeats itself. On November the 23rd, 1867, three Fenians, as they were called then, which is a derogatory term for Catholics, William Philip Allen, Michael O'Brien, and Michael Larkin, known as the Manchester Martyrs, were executed in Salford for their attack on a police van to release Fenians held captive earlier that year. On December the 13th, 1867, the Fenians exploded a bomb in an attempt to free one of their members from being held on remand at Clerkenwell Prison in London. The explosion damaged nearby houses, killed 12 people, and caused 120 injuries. None of the prisoners escaped. Patrick J. Whelan was hanged in Ottawa, in Canada, for the assassination of the Irish-Canadian politician Thomas D'Arcy McGee in 1868. Near 100 years previous. Now, Sinn Féin, which is the political party in Ireland, has allegiance with the IRA and Mr. Adams and Mr. McGuinness, who were both working for the system, not for the Irish people. And I spoke about the real truth about the Battle of the Boyne, and that William of Orange was not British but Dutch, and he was made King of England for his endeavours. And this shows what these people do over a prolonged period of time, playing the same games over and over again, sometimes even using the same characters, despite the gap in time. The sleight of hand is a common theme. The Order loves nothing more than watching us all go down blind alleys. They throw in a narrative and a direction they wish people to go, and largely we have followed it every single time. But some can see beyond the illusion and the sleight of hand and are now pulling back the curtain on their fake theatre productions. On that particular show, there was a guy who talked a lot of sense about Irish history and the Constitution, but then he was blaming the wrong people for the plight of Ireland. Now, they believe it's the Brits and the Queen is the source of all their ills. Now, neither of those two have covered themselves in any glory, that we do know. But both are the fall guys for that particular narrative, as the Battle of the Boyne was not done by the Brits, but actually the Dutch royal house groups, and in particular the House of Orange. William of Orange's celebration done by the Protestants, I find particularly stupid, given this event happened nearly 400 years ago. Even more stupid when it's celebrating someone who was A, part of the system of control against us, and B, that person was from Holland, not the UK. Think different is the key. And as for the Catholics and your fight is again beyond stupid if you don't bother to learn your own history. Once you learn that the IRA, Sinn Féin, Fenians were never fighting for you, but were fighting for the system to eliminate you and your history, then things start to make much more sense. Scotia was the real name of Ireland, had much history that goes against the narrative of the system, and in particular the Roman Catholic Church wants to portray. Your church you all worship have destroyed every aspect of your life, every day of your life. You have chosen to ignore their crimes. Unlike the Catholics of the 1500s, who were protesting against that very same church, which later morphed into a religion called Protestantism. And essentially, the Irish people are fighting your own people. Do you not realise that? You have all been played. So the thing I pose to the Irish people is, do you carry on hating your own people and play the program system game, or do you use the brains you were given and realise the problem is not politicians? You give them far too much credit than they deserve. The problem's not North or South, Catholic or Protestant. The problem is you. All of you. And it's time to correct it, is it not? Try coming together as people. Not as Irish, not as Catholic, not as Protestants, not as supporters of Dutch kings or Pope worshippers. Just people. We ended January with one of what would become more prevalent throughout the year of heavy-ass pieces about us. And this was about the PSI field. Imagine your PSI field, and for those new, it's like your aura, what you would know as your aura. Is like an item of clothing. You love that worn out old jacket and refuse to replace it. But it's not the jacket you hold on to. It is the frequency of it. Also comfortable, despite holes, tears and out of shape, you hold onto it until it falls off your back, or the wife bins it on trash day so you can't recover it. The same applies to our PSI field on an individual and collective level. The question is, how will you fare walking in a 50-mile-an-hour blizzard of snow with that jacket on? Not too well. And the wearer may well change jackets, and yet many choose to ignore their own personal jacket and leave holes in it and wander around life in a blizzard of negative frequencies day after day, and then wonder why life is crap. Some will say, well, I can't see it, so it's not real. No one can see air, but we still breathe it. No one can see God, Jesus, or Muhammad, but 4.5 billion believe it. Denying its existence is a frequency-based suicide program. Imagine inside the jacket is a cup filled with oil, and you attempt to clean that cup with water. What happens? The oil stays and the water skims off. So neither the cup or the item of clothing gets cleansed. It just sits there. Except unlike the cup or jacket, ours festers, expands, proliferates, and weighs us down. The cup, which is the inner you, is filled with negative frequencies of anger, frustration, anguish, envy, insecurities, inferiority complex, little me, victimhood and saviour program, hate, pain and traumas. A vicious cocktail of frequencies, none of which is helpful to you in this life or future lives for that matter. A thick, viscous soup that leaves you, in essence, like walking through life in treacle, molasses for the Americans. So that is essentially what we have become, a thick soup. Then we come to the garments you wear, known as the PSI field. Again, that is thick in oil, full of holes and tears. You try to wash it off and it rolls off. Too greasy or slippery. So you have to break it down to clean that field also. A PSI field full of holes is an entrance point for astral level infections, dark spirits, and extinct critters. Your field is filled with your inner trauma and also the anger and frustrations of everyone else in your close environment or you engage with. And you think you can thrive in that environment? You think your inner light can shine like a beacon in that environment? Nope. The oil is that thick. Not enough of your inner light penetrates. That's the problem of some of the disciples we referenced on Saturday. Or Thursday it was, wasn't it? So essentially you've become a walking stream of negative lower level frequencies. Your PSI field is connected to other lower level frequencies and you've become a walking Wi-Fi delivery system of the same negative frequencies. And you drag them through your lives day after day. At some point, you will have had a fallout with someone, be it vocal or by violence, and you no longer speak to that person and you think that that is that. Nope. You have a tentacle or cord still connected with that frequency or that person because you never let it go. Now imagine all the other tentacles you have with all the other people you've had bad interactions with. And you are like a villain trapped by Spider-Man, meshed in a negative web that you may perceive was not your doing, but a different percentage of that interaction was down to you and your reactions to it. It doesn't matter who started it. It's always Michelle. She starts it. But it's your it's your reactions to it. And this is the essence of why your shadow and inner work is the most important thing you can do. You repeat behaviours and bad scenarios in your life because you didn't address the previous ones. I guess it's time to cut some cords, is it not? Every sexual intercourse encounter you have had creates a cord also. So whilst it may have been fun at the time you notched up all those encounters, perhaps it was not the best interaction for you overall, was it? I imagine some thinking back now of all the ones they've slept with and going, holy F, Thomas, did you really have to say that? I didn't want to hear that. Well, I've said you will hear what you need to know, not what you want to know. That sexual cord lasts for 7 years. The global PSI field is also a thick treacle, mired in discord, disconnection, distortions and lies. Your PSI field you wear is based on lies and the masking of lies that you embrace. Because it is or was not the real you, was it? We have all worn masks to cover up our own perceived weaknesses. A dropping of the mask leaves the real you. Now, if you don't like the real you, or not enough if the real you is being shown, that is up to you to correct it. This is why we warned of it back in 2015, 2016 to give you a heads up. We accepted the narrative fed to us and it became part of our field, like the old worn-out jacket. We held onto it for far too long. But there is a tiny light inside of you all that is chirping away going, this field, this life, and your whole reality is bullshit. It won't go away. The whole field holds all the lies we've been fed on and in all aspects of life. The field, in essence, is like an AI copy of illusion. It's a mask. We are not Phantom of the Opera, men or women. We are a shining beacon. So why do we all dull that light with bullshit and fakery? As your inner light gets bigger, and as you cut more of your cords for your inner work, you reach a tipping point where the light shines more than the oily, dark shadows. And it's screaming to get out of this field. This is your knowledge-based awakening. And suddenly things start to make more sense. The fog has been lifted and your inner and outer vision is suddenly a whole lot clearer. Reality just walked in your door and slapped you out of your self-induced coma. No more back in the permanent sleeper pods for you. You can't undo what you have learned and go back. Because that you no longer exists. Why? Because you are no longer in that field or frequency anymore. And finally, your life will begin to grow. So despite all your cords, disconnections, traumas, strife, pain, and consuming volumes of negative frequencies, consume the lies and wear them proudly and stubbornly, wore your masks of illusion, having slept for vast parts of your life, had clever manipulators pulling strings in the background, walking through life in a vast vat of treacle. You came out the other side and started to shine your beacons of light as only an organic human can. So for the ones who have achieved it, give yourselves a pat on the back for even getting this far. Still waiting for the event, I said that time. You were the event. And I just disturbed your own sound of silence.